Alright, hello everybody. This is going to be quite the different video. Instead of playing a game, a full-blown game, I'm going to have Marvel Rivals playing in the background, and I am going to be going over a few rules for some future single-player games I intend on playing on the channel. If you don't know what a Souls-like game is, it is very fun yet very difficult games that are meant to be incredibly challenging, not only in how you beat them, but also, you know, puzzles, how many times you die, etc., etc. Point being, this is going to be me explaining a few challenge rules that I'd like to apply to myself while playing these Souls-like games. Now, yeah, as if the games weren't challenging enough as they already are. But this is going to be a few rules. I intend on following each of these rules in each and every Souls-like game that I intend on playing here on the channel. Each of the rules I'm going to be talking about in this video are going to globally apply to each of the games I play. However, most of the games are going to have a subset of rules that are going to be very specific to the game that they are played in. So let's get into the first rule. The first rule I will be giving myself for these Souls-like video games is a death limit. Now, if you're familiar with the Souls-like games, you already know that you are bound to die a lot in each of these games. And I want to give myself a little goal in each of these, considering that they are some of the hardest games in history. I want to challenge myself to beat them in under a certain amount of deaths. A few people like to keep track of their deaths while playing these Souls-like games. I'm kind of taking it a step further by not only keeping track of my deaths, but also like limiting my deaths. It's not necessarily a limit. It's more of, hey, I'm going to challenge myself to beat it in this amount of time, or not amount of time. You get the idea. The first game in these Souls-likes I intend on playing is Wolong Fallen Dynasty, which I already have played a good amount, and I'm currently editing the first video. But I already have a limit, or a challenge, of under 600 deaths to beat the game. And these death limit ranges are going to be a complete high and end scale. Some of these games, like Wolong, will be a little bit lower on the 600 route, while games like Elden Ring could be up there in like 900, 1,000 deaths. What I intend on doing is I'll be talking about my death limit at the beginning of each of these series, and then I will keep track throughout each of the videos of how many deaths I have. It'll just depend on each of the games. But now, on to rule number 2. The second rule I'm going to be giving myself in these Souls-like games is boss 100% completion. A lot of these games are, as I've said, stupidly difficult, especially when it comes to 100%ing their story and all of the content that comes in the games, which is why, for at least a vast majority of these Souls-like games, maybe even all of them, I'm not going to 100% the entire game as a whole. However, the bosses are a different story. The bosses I want to keep track of. I want to, sort of before each of these playthroughs, keep a list of each of the bosses, and whether they are mainline bosses or whether they are side story bosses, I want to make sure that I beat every single boss in the game on the channel. It's going to be difficult, and trust me, it's going to be a long time to get each of these done if I want to beat every single boss. But I want to make sure that for each of these games, for each of these playthroughs, I beat every single boss at least once. Now on to rule number 3. Rule number 3 is going to be a little bit different from the first two. The first two were more, video related. This one's going to be somewhat video related, somewhat game related. This is talking about the storylines for each of the games. Some of these games only have one coherent story from start to finish, no endings, no side DLCs, nothing. I believe Wo Long has a couple DLCs, but I'll get to that when I get to that. So for games like that, I'm just going to play through the game, finish the DLC if it has any, and play through. I'll get to the DLC in the next rule. But for games like Lies of P and Elden Ring, they have several endings, 3 to be precise. So, one of the things I want to do is, while I don't want to do several playthroughs and upload them on the channel, I would like to get every single ending for most of the games on the channel. Now, it's going to be a little bit difficult, and for some games like Lies of P, you do have to do an entire second or potentially third playthrough in order to get these endings to the game, which would be annoying, but I would just make sure that I record the final bosses or the ending parts and then upload them, of course. That is going to be one that is incredibly difficult, especially for games like Lies of P, where I do have to go through an entire other playthrough, but I am committed and I fully intend on beating every single game and uploading every single ending to YouTube. And now on to the final rule of this video, rule number 4. For the fourth and final rule that applies overall to every single Souls-like game I intend on playing, this rule is focusing around the DLCs. For the games it's applicable, I will also be playing through the DLC expansions. However, there are a few modifications to the past 3 rules I've talked about that will still apply to the DLCs. For the DLCs, I will still be giving myself sort of the challenge of beating every single boss, which will, for games like Elden Ring, be incredibly difficult, but I'm up to the challenge. If the DLCs sometimes do have different story endings, I will also be playing through that, but that's not too common when it comes to DLCs in games. However, when it comes to the death challenges, it's going to be quite different. When starting a DLC playthrough, it will be considered a fully new series, not only on the channel, but in terms of my playthrough, and therefore require a new death challenge for me to attempt. Giving an example. If I give myself 800 deaths to beat Elden Ring, and then I beat Elden Ring in 712 deaths, that does not mean that I only have 88 deaths to finish the DLC. It is completely non-related to the game I am going to be playing through when it comes to the DLC. When I start a DLC, it'll be the same as any other series. At the very first episode, I will be talking about that limit and giving myself a completely new challenge. Considering, like, oh, I beat Elden Ring in 712 deaths. This is still an example. Maybe I can beat the DLC in under 700 deaths. That's sort of what will happen, but that is going to be all the rules I apply towards these Souls-like games, and each and every one of them will have all of these rules applied. Some might have a few extra rules that are specific to their games alone, but overall, each of these games are going to work off of these rules. This was a pretty different video, not only for myself to record, but I'm sure for you guys to watch. This video is likely linked in each and every one of my upcoming Souls-like first playthrough games. So if you guys enjoyed, again, like, subscribe, go check out my Twitch, link in the description, and I'll see you all in the next one.